In a modest Los Angeles salon, a hairstylist with a mysterious past refuses a $1 million tip from a celebrity, setting off a chain of events that will uncover long-buried secrets, reunite a broken family, and test the limits of human redemption. Prepare for an emotional journey that will challenge everything you believe about second chances, sacrifice, and the transformative power of truth. The California sun cast its golden light over the bustling streets of Los Angeles, illuminating the shiny storefronts and hopeful faces of aspiring stars roaming the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the City of Dreams, a small beauty salon stood out not for its glamour, but for the welcoming simplicity that emanated from its weathered facade. Cuts and Conversations was a modest refuge amidst the chaos of the metropolis. Its sign, somewhat faded by time, invited passers-by to step inside and experience a moment of transformation. Inside, the scent of shampoo and aftershave lingered in the air, mingling with the soft sounds of jazz music playing from an old radio in the corner of the room. Mark Stevens, the owner and sole hairstylist of the establishment, was busy sweeping hair off the floor when the doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of a new client. In his early 50s, Mark was an intriguing figure. His deep blue eyes, as profound as the ocean, seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. His hands, skilled with scissors and comb, occasionally trembled when he thought no one was watching. "Good morning," Mark greeted the newcomer with a gentle smile, but his eyes revealed a melancholy that did not match the cheerful atmosphere of the salon. There was something about Mark, an aura of mystery that made clients wonder about his past. Some swore he had been someone important before becoming a hairstylist, but Mark always skillfully dodged questions about his previous life. While working on the haircut of an elderly lady, Mark chatted about trivialities, his voice soothing and reassuring. "And how is your grandson, Mrs. Johnson? Still dreaming of being an astronaut?" The client smiled, delighted by Mark's memory of the details of her life. It was this personal touch that kept clients coming back, week after week, month after month. The day passed normally, with Mark attending to his regular clients. The retired policeman who always requested the same military cut, the young student trying out a new look with each visit, the stressed-out executive who came more for the conversation than the haircut itself. Each client brought with them a piece of the outside world, and Mark listened attentively, as if each story were a precious treasure. But around 3 in the afternoon, something extraordinary happened. The door opened, and through it came a figure that made time freeze inside the small salon. Ryan Thompson, the Hollywood star whose face adorned billboards all over the city, crossed the threshold of Cuts and Conversations. Silence fell over the salon like a heavy shroud. Scissors stopped mid-air, mouths gaped open, and even the radio seemed to lower its volume in respect for the celebrity's presence. Ryan, with his sunglasses and discreet cap, clearly hoped to go unnoticed, but it was impossible not to recognize that million-dollar smile. Mark, ever professional, was the first to recover from the shock. "Welcome, sir. How may I help you today?" His voice betrayed no emotion other than polite courtesy, but his eyes narrowed for a moment as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. Ryan removed his sunglasses, revealing tired green eyes. "I need a quick trim. I have a premiere tonight, and my regular stylist canceled at the last minute." He looked around nervously as if expecting a horde of paparazzi to invade the place at any moment. Mark nodded, gesturing to the empty chair. "Of course, I'll be happy to help. Please have a seat." As Ryan settled in, the other clients began to whisper excitedly. Phones were discreetly pulled out to capture the surreal moment. With precise and steady movements, Mark began to work on the actor's hair. His hands, which had trembled slightly before, were now as steady as rocks. He cut and trimmed with the precision of a surgeon, each movement calculated and perfect. Ryan, initially tense, began to relax under Mark's skilled care. "You have talented hands," the actor commented. "You've done this before, haven't you?" For a brief moment, a shadow crossed Mark's face. "Yes," he replied simply, without elaborating. The silence that followed was filled only with the soft snip of the scissors. As he worked, Mark occasionally stole furtive glances at Ryan as if trying to remember something important. The actor, in turn, seemed increasingly intrigued by the mysterious hairstylist. Finally, after 45 minutes of meticulous work, Mark stepped back. "All done, sir. What do you think?" Ryan examined his reflection in the mirror, a genuine smile lighting up his tired face. "This is incredible. Better than my regular stylist, to be honest." The actor stood up, pulling out his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Mark quoted a modest price, the same he would charge any regular client. Ryan, impressed with the work and touched by Mark's discretion, decided to be generous. "Here," said Ryan, extending several $100 bills. "Keep the change. You deserve it." It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Mark, looking at the bills in his hand, suddenly paled. With a swift movement, he returned the money to Ryan. "I can't accept this," said Mark, his voice trembling slightly. "The price is what it says on the board. Nothing more." The entire salon was in shock. Ryan, confused and a little offended, tried to insist. "But the work was exceptional. Please accept it as a thank you." Mark, however, remained steadfast. "No, Mr. Thompson. I can't accept your tip. The standard payment is more than enough." The tension in the air was palpable. The other clients watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Ryan, realizing that it was pointless to argue, finally agreed to pay only the regular amount. As the actor prepared to leave, he cast one last intrigued look at Mark. "Thank you for the cut. Are you sure we haven't met before?" Mark smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure, Mr. Thompson. Have a good evening." When Ryan left, the salon erupted into animated conversations. Everyone wanted to know why Mark had refused such a generous tip from a celebrity. The hairstylist, however, remained silent, returning to work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for those who watched closely, it was clear that something had changed. Mark's hands trembled again, and his eyes carried an even heavier burden than before. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, casting long shadows through the salon windows, it was clear that the cut that changed everything was not just a haircut but the beginning of something much larger and more complex than anyone could have imagined. The constant hum of heart monitors and the antiseptic smell of the hospital enveloped Dr. Marcus Stevenson as he walked through the corridors of the renowned Los Angeles Children's Medical Center. His footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor, each one carrying the weight of the responsibility he bore on his shoulders. At the age of 40, Dr. Stevenson was considered one of the most promising pediatric neurosurgeons in the country. His blue eyes, now hidden behind reading glasses, carefully examined the chart in his hands. The case awaiting him that morning was undoubtedly the most challenging of his career. "Dr. Stevenson?" A nurse approached him, her expression a mix of anxiety and expectation. "The Thompson family has arrived. They're waiting in the pre-op room." Marcus nodded, feeling a twinge of apprehension. The name Thompson carried considerable weight not only in medical circles but throughout Hollywood. Ryan Thompson, the father of the young patient, was one of the most famous actors of the moment. Upon entering the room, Marcus was immediately struck by the palpable tension in the air. Ryan Thompson stood, his usually vibrant green eyes now dull with worry. Beside him, his wife Elena held the hand of an 8-year-old boy, whose blonde hair framed a pale and frightened face. "Dr. Stevenson," Ryan stepped forward, extending his hand. "You don't know how much we appreciate you taking on Lucas's case." Marcus shook the actor's hand, noticing the subtle tremor. "It's my duty and my honor, Mr. Thompson. I'll do everything in my power to help Lucas." Turning to the boy, Marcus knelt to meet his eyes. "Hey, champ, ready for our big adventure today?" Lucas nodded shyly, his eyes lighting up with childlike curiosity. "You're going to fix my head, doctor?" A gentle smile spread across Marcus's face. "I'm going to do my best, Lucas. And when we're done, you'll have a cool scar to show your friends." Elena stifled a sob, and Ryan wrapped her in a comforting embrace. Marcus stood up, facing the parents with a serious but confident expression. I know you're scared. Lucas's tumor is complex, but we caught it in time. The surgery will be long and delicate, but I have an excellent team with me. We'll do everything humanly possible." The hours that followed were a blur of preparations, final checks, and the meticulous ritual of sterilization. When Marcus finally entered the operating room, the silence that greeted him was almost deafening. Lucas was already anesthetized, his small body looking even smaller on the operating table. "Scalpel," Marcus requested, his voice firm and controlled. The nurse handed him the instrument, and with a deep breath, he made the first incision. Time seemed to drag on as the surgery progressed. Marcus worked with millimetric precision, his movements fluid and assured as he navigated the delicate brain tissue. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in, but his concentration never wavered. Then the unthinkable happened. An unexpected bleed obscured Marcus's field of vision. The monitors began emitting shrill alarms. "Pressure dropping," one of the anesthesiologists shouted. Marcus felt panic threatening to take over, but years of training kept him focused. "More suction. We need to control this bleeding now." The next few minutes were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Marcus worked furiously, his hands moving with superhuman speed and precision. Sweat dripped down his face, fogging his glasses, but he didn't dare stop to wipe them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the monitors stabilized. The bleeding was controlled, and Marcus could breathe again. But the relief was short-lived. As he examined the affected area, his heart sank. "Extensive damage to the surrounding tissue," he murmured, more to himself than to the team. The realization of what this could mean for Lucas hit him like a punch to the gut. With Herculean effort, Marcus completed the surgery, removing as much of the tumor as possible without causing additional harm. When he finally stepped away from the operating table, his legs trembled with exhaustion. "Close up," he instructed his team, his voice hoarse with fatigue and contained emotion. As he prepared to leave the operating room, Marcus was overtaken by a wave of nausea. What would he tell the Thompsons? How would he explain that, despite his best efforts, Lucas's future was now uncertain? Removing his surgical mask, Marcus faced his reflection in the operating room window. The man staring back at him looked as if he had aged a decade in a matter of hours. His eyes, usually bright and confident, were clouded with doubt and guilt. In that moment, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the hospital corridors, Dr. Marcus Stevenson did not know that his life was about to change forever. The distant echo of approaching footsteps, likely Ryan and Elena Thompson anxious for news, sounded like a harbinger of a future he could not have foreseen. With one last look at the operating room, where Lucas was still being prepared for recovery, Marcus took a deep breath and turned to face the boy's parents. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders as he prepared to deliver news that would change not only the Thompsons' lives but also his own, in ways he could not yet imagine. The rain battered against the windows of the small apartment in the suburbs of Los Angeles, creating a liquid curtain that distorted the view of the outside world. Inside, in the dim light of a poorly lit room, Dr. Marcus Stevenson, now just Marcus, sat in a worn-out armchair with a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey by his side. His eyes, once vibrant and full of purpose, were now dull and bloodshot, fixed on an invisible point on the peeling wall in front of him. His unshaven beard and disheveled hair were silent testimonies to his steep fall from grace. A year had passed since that fateful surgery. A year since his life had crumbled like a house of cards in the wind. Memories assaulted him, relentless and cruel. The devastated faces of Ryan and Elena Thompson when he delivered the news. Elena's desperate sobs. The restrained fury in Ryan's eyes. "You said you could save him!" The actor's voice echoed in his mind, an endless accusation. Then came the investigations, the endless hearings, the disapproving looks from colleagues, the sensationalist headlines, "Star Surgeon Ruins Child's Life." His reputation, built over years of study and dedication, was shattered in a matter of days. Marcus brought the bottle to his lips, letting the amber liquid burn down his throat. It was the only sensation that made him feel anything besides the emptiness and crushing guilt. The shrill sound of the phone cut through the silence, making Marcus startle. He looked at the device as if it were a snake about to strike. After several rings, the answering machine picked up. "Marcus, it's Dr. Keller again." His old mentor's voice sounded tired and worried. "Please pick up. We know it was an accident. There are options. Rehabilitation programs. You don't have to go through this alone." Marcus laughed bitterly. Options? What options were left for a man who had lost everything? His medical license had been revoked. His wife had left him, unable to deal with his downward spiral of self-destruction. Even his parents, though concerned, kept their distance, uncertain how to help the son they no longer recognized. Struggling to stand, Marcus staggered to the bathroom. The cracked mirror reflected an image he barely recognized. Where was the confident and compassionate doctor he once was? All he saw now was a broken man, haunted by the ghosts of his past. The weeks dragged on, blending into months of alcoholic haze and deep depression. Marcus rarely left home, surviving on food deliveries and the little money left from his savings. It was on one of those rare outings to buy more booze that fate intervened. Stumbling down the sidewalk, Marcus didn't see the uneven step. He tripped, falling heavily onto the rough ground. The sharp pain in his wrist momentarily pulled him out of his stupor. "Hey, are you okay?" A gentle voice reached him. Firm hands helped him up. Marcus looked up, meeting the concerned gaze of a middle-aged man. I'm fine," Marcus mumbled, embarrassed. The stranger, however, was not convinced. "That wrist doesn't look good. Come on, my shop is nearby. I have a first aid kit there." Before he could protest, Marcus found himself being guided into a small establishment. The faded sign read, "Cuts and Conversations." Inside the shop, the aroma of shampoo and aftershave was a shocking contrast to the smell of alcohol emanating from Marcus. The owner skillfully cleaned and bandaged his injured wrist. "You know," the man began casually, "I'm looking for an assistant, someone to help with the basic tasks around the shop." "Interested?" Marcus blinked, confused. I don't know anything about cutting hair." The man smiled. "We all start knowing nothing. The important thing is the willingness to learn, to start over." Those words hit Marcus like a bolt of lightning. Start over. The idea seemed so distant, so impossible until that moment. "Why would you do this?" Marcus asked, his voice choked. "You don't know me." The owner shrugged. "Sometimes all someone needs is a chance. I got mine once. Now I'm offering one to you." That night, back in his apartment, Marcus stayed awake for hours, contemplating the offer. The whiskey bottle, his faithful companion for so long, remained untouched on the table. The next morning, with trembling but determined hands, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He shaved. Looking in the mirror, he saw a glimpse of the man he used to be. He was no longer Dr. Stevenson, the renowned neurosurgeon. But maybe, just maybe, he could be Mark, the hairdressing assistant seeking redemption. With hesitant steps, but, for the first time in a year, driven by a purpose, Marcus, now Mark, left his apartment heading towards Cuts and Conversations. It was a small step, but it was a beginning towards a new life, far from the spotlight and the overwhelming expectations of his past. As he walked through the streets of Los Angeles, Mark could not imagine that this modest new beginning would set him on a path to a destiny he could never have foreseen. A destiny that would reconnect him with his past in surprising ways and force him to confront the demons that had haunted him for so long. The soft chime of the bell above the Cuts and Conversations door echoed through the empty room as Mark turned the sign from open to closed. The day had been long, filled with customers and trivial conversations, but Mark's mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts about the unexpected encounter with Ryan Thompson. Sitting heavily in the barber's chair, Mark let out a deep sigh. The image of Ryan, so close yet so distant at the same time, had stirred a restlessness within him that he thought he had long buried. "Why now?" he murmured to himself, running his hands over his tired face. "Why, after all these years?" With trembling fingers, Mark opened a hidden drawer beneath the counter, revealing an old laptop. It was a relic of his past life, kept not out of sentimentality, but as an anchor to the truth he had never been able to completely forget. Turning on the device, Mark hesitated for a moment before typing Ryan Thompson into the search bar. A flood of news and photos filled the screen, most celebrating the actor's recent successes. But Mark wasn't interested in that. His eyes scanned the headlines, looking for something specific, something that might explain the troubled look in Ryan's eyes during his visit to the shop. It was then that a headline caught his attention. Ryan Thompson makes $1 million donation to pediatric neurology research. The article was dated just 3 months ago. Intrigued, Mark clicked on the link, his eyes devouring every word of the article. The donation had been made to the same hospital where the fateful surgery had taken place years before. The text vaguely mentioned a personal tragedy that had motivated the actor's generosity, but didn't go into details. "This doesn't make sense," Mark murmured, frowning. If Lucas had died, as he had always believed, why would Ryan make such a substantial donation now, so many years later? Driven by a curiosity bordering on obsession, Mark dove deeper. Hours passed as he combed through old files, partially erased medical records, and leaked emails. Each new piece of information was a fragment of a bizarre and unsettling puzzle. As the night wore on, a disturbing picture began to form. Inconsistencies in medical records, contradictory statements from hospital staff, suspicious financial transactions involving the hospital administration and Ryan's legal representatives. Mark felt his heart race. Something was deeply wrong. The evidence, though fragmented, pointed to a shocking conclusion. Lucas Thompson had not died that day. "My God," Mark whispered, leaning back in the chair, stunned by the revelation. They lied. They all lied. But why? What could be the motive behind such an elaborate deception? And more importantly, where was Lucas now? Determined to uncover the truth, Mark continued his investigation late into the night. Each new discovery drew him deeper into a web of secrets and lies that seemed to involve not only the hospital but also powerful figures in the entertainment industry. It was almost dawn when Mark found something that made his blood run cold. An encrypted email, dated just days after the surgery, mentioned a silence agreement and the need to protect greater interests. The names of the senders had been carefully erased, but the content was clear. Someone with significant power and influence wanted the truth about Lucas to remain hidden. Suddenly, a noise outside the shop startled Mark. Looking out the window, he saw a dark car parked across the street, its tinted windows obscuring the view of whoever might be inside. A chill ran down his spine. Was it paranoia, or was someone really watching him? With shaky hands, Mark shut down the laptop and hid it again. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process everything he had discovered. The truth, or at least part of it, was right before his eyes. But what to do with this information? Telling Ryan seemed the right thing to do. But what if the actor was involved in the conspiracy? What if, by revealing what he knew, Mark was putting himself and possibly Lucas in danger? As the first rays of sun began to illuminate the streets of Los Angeles, Mark found himself facing a moral dilemma he never imagined facing. The decision he made next would not only change his life but potentially unravel one of the biggest scandals Hollywood had ever seen. With one last look at the mysterious car, which still remained parked, Mark locked the shop door and headed for the back. He knew he couldn't simply ignore what he had discovered. The truth, no matter how dangerous, needed to come to light. But first, he needed a plan. And, more importantly, he needed to find a way to approach Ryan Thompson without raising suspicion. Fate had brought them together once at the shop. Now, Mark would have to find a way to make that happen again, this time on his own terms. As he prepared to face a new day, Mark knew that every move from that moment on would be crucial. The game of cat and mouse had begun, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The California afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of cuts and conversations, creating golden stripes on the salon floor. Mark, scissors in hand, worked meticulously on an elderly customer's hair, his precise movements masking the inner storm consuming him. Since his shocking discovery the night before, Mark had barely slept. Every customer who walked through the door made his heart jump, wondering if it would be Ryan Thompson returning. The truth he had uncovered weighed on his shoulders like an anchor, dragging him into the depths of a moral dilemma he had never imagined facing. And then I told my granddaughter, "Sweetheart, you can't just give up on your dreams because of a setback." The lady continued her story, oblivious to Mark's distraction. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Patel," Mark responded automatically, his thoughts miles away. As he worked, his mind replayed the facts. Lucas Thompson, Ryan's son, had not died in that fateful surgery. For some obscure reason, an elaborate lie had been constructed. Powerful people had conspired to keep this secret. And now, years later, fate had brought Ryan Thompson back into his life. The doorbell jingled, startling Mark. His gaze jumped to the entrance, but it was only the mailman with the day's mail. "I need to tell him," Mark murmured to himself, so low that Mrs. Patel didn't hear. "He has the right to know." But then doubts assailed him again. What if Ryan already knew? What if he was part of the conspiracy? Worse still, what if by revealing what he knew, Mark put Lucas in danger? Finishing Mrs. Patel's haircut, Mark bid her farewell with a forced smile. As soon as the door closed behind her, he collapsed into the chair, his head in his hands. The weight of the truth was crushing. On one hand, there was the moral imperative to reveal what he knew, to right a monumental injustice. On the other, the fear of the consequences not only for himself but for everyone involved. That night, after closing the shop, Mark decided he needed fresh air to clear his thoughts. He walked aimlessly through the streets of Los Angeles, the neon signs and the city's hustle and bustle doing nothing to ease his restlessness. Then fate intervened once more. Turning a corner, Mark found himself face to face with a gigantic billboard. On it, Ryan Thompson's face smiled, announcing his latest movie. The actor's eyes, even in the static image, seemed to pierce Mark, as if daring him to reveal what he knew. At that moment, a resolution formed in his heart. He needed to get close to Ryan, build a relationship of trust, before revealing the truth. He couldn't just dump this explosive information without fully understanding the context. Returning to the shop with determined steps, Mark began to devise a plan. He would use his newly acquired skills as a hairdresser to get close to Ryan. He would offer exclusive services, special hours, anything to ensure the actor returned to cuts and conversations. In the days that followed, Mark lived in a constant state of alert. Every time the door opened, he hoped to see Ryan. Meanwhile, he continued his silent investigation, piecing together more of the puzzle. It was on a rainy Tuesday that the opportunity finally arose. Ryan Thompson entered the salon, drenched and looking exhausted. "Hey," said the actor, a tired smile on his face. "I hope it's not too late for a cut." Mark felt his heart race but kept his composure. "It's never too late for you, Mr. Thompson. Please have a seat." As he worked on Ryan's hair, Mark initiated casual conversation, carefully probing the waters. They talked about the weather, Ryan's new movie, and Hollywood trivialities. But behind every word exchanged, Mark searched for signs, clues that might indicate how much Ryan knew or suspected. "You know," Ryan commented at one point, his eyes meeting Mark's in the mirror, "there's something familiar about you. Are you sure we haven't met before?" Mark felt a lump in his throat. "Maybe in another life," he replied, trying to keep the tone light. As the haircut progressed, Mark noticed something in Ryan's eyes. A deep sadness, a pain that seemed to go beyond the exhaustion of a Hollywood star. It was the look of a man carrying a heavy burden. When the cut was finished and Ryan was preparing to leave, Mark made an impulsive decision. "Mr. Thompson," he called, his voice trembling slightly, "if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here." Ryan stopped, looking at Mark with a mixture of surprise and something else. Gratitude? Recognition? "Thank you," the actor replied, his voice low. Maybe I'll take you up on that." When the door closed behind Ryan, Mark knew he had taken the first step on a dangerous journey. The truth was there, hovering between them, unspoken but almost tangible. That night, looking out the salon window, Mark saw the dark car parked across the street again. But this time, instead of fear, he felt a renewed determination. He would discover the truth about Lucas Thompson. And, no matter the cost, he would do what was right. The game of cat and mouse had begun, and Mark was determined to see it through, even if it meant facing his own demons in the process. The tension in the air was palpable as Mark and Ryan faced each other in the small office at the back of Cuts and Conversations. The soft hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound breaking the charged silence. Mark, with his heart pounding in his chest, knew that this was the moment of truth. "Ryan," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you, something that will change everything." The actor frowned, confused. "What are you talking about, Mark? What could be so important?" Mark took a deep breath, gathering all his courage. "My real name isn't Mark Stevens. I'm Dr. Marcus Stevenson. I was the surgeon who operated on your son, Lucas, 10 years ago." Ryan's face turned pale, his eyes widening in shock and disbelief. "What? But that's impossible. Dr. Stevenson, you disappeared." Everyone said. "I know," Mark interrupted gently. "I ran away. I hid. The guilt over what happened. It consumed me. But Ryan, there's more. Much more." In the minutes that followed, Mark spilled everything he had discovered. The conspiracy, the lies, the falsified documents. And the most shocking truth of all, Lucas was alive. Ryan staggered, gripping the edge of the table for balance. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions. Shock, anger, hope, fear. This can't be true," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "They showed me. I saw." "I know it's hard to believe," Mark said, taking a step forward. "But I have proof. Documents, emails, medical records. Ryan, your son is alive somewhere." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan stumbled to a chair, collapsing into it under the weight of the revelation. Mark waited, tense, unsure of how the actor would react. Finally, Ryan looked up, his eyes shining with a mixture of tears and determination. "Show me," he demanded. "Show me everything." The hours that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Mark presented all the evidence he had collected, explaining every detail of the conspiracy he had uncovered. Ryan wavered between disbelief and fury, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of shock. "Why?" Ryan finally asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why would they do this? Why lie about my son's death?" Mark shook his head. "I don't know all the details yet, but from what I've discovered, it involves money, power, and some very influential people in the entertainment industry. Your son, Lucas, may have seen or heard something he shouldn't have." Ryan stood abruptly, pacing back and forth across the small office. "We need to find him. We need to find my son." Mark nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "Yes, but we need to be careful. The people behind this are powerful and dangerous. If they find out we're investigating..." "I don't care about the danger," Ryan interrupted, his eyes blazing with determination. "He's my son. I'll do whatever it takes to find him." Mark stood up, looking Ryan in the eye. "I know, and I'll help you. I owe it to you, to Lucas. But we need to be smart about this. We can't just go shouting the truth to the world." Ryan nodded slowly, the reality of the situation finally settling in. "You're right. So, what's the next step?" "We need to investigate more," Mark replied. "Follow the clues, connect the dots. And we need to do it without raising suspicion." The two men looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Enemies just hours ago, now they were allies united by a common goal. "Why are you doing this?" Ryan asked suddenly. "Why are you helping me, after everything?" Mark hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I need to redeem myself. I couldn't save your son that day in the operating room, but maybe I can help bring him back to you now." Ryan reached out, squeezing Mark's shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice laden with emotion. When Ryan finally left the salon that night, the Los Angeles sky was already painted with the colors of twilight. Mark watched the actor leave, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. The truth had come to light, but it was only the beginning. The road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain. But for the first time in years, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would help Ryan find Lucas no matter the cost. As he locked the salon door, Mark cast a cautious glance at the street. The dark car was still there, a silent reminder of the dangers that awaited them. But now, instead of fear, Mark felt a fierce determination. The hunt had begun, and they wouldn't stop until the full truth was brought to light and Lucas Thompson was found. The gentle hum of Mark's rental car engine was the only sound breaking the tense silence between him and Ryan. The lights of Los Angeles faded into the distance as they drove toward the suburbs, following a lead that could take them to Lucas. "Are you sure about this?" Ryan asked, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Is this information reliable?" Mark nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him inside. "It's the best we've got right now. The address was hidden in one of the encrypted files I managed to access." The past few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions and discoveries. Mark and Ryan, unlikely allies, had dived headfirst into the investigation, sifting through every piece of information they could find about Lucas's whereabouts. The search had led them to dead ends, false leads, and dangerous encounters with shady figures in the entertainment industry. Each new detail uncovered only deepened the mystery and increased the stakes. "There," Mark pointed to a modest house at the end of the street. "Number 1542. That's it." Ryan parked the car at a safe distance, his body tense like a spring ready to snap. "Now what? Do we just knock on the door?" Mark hesitated. A direct approach could scare off whoever was protecting Lucas. On the other hand, too much stealth might raise suspicions. "Let's watch for a bit first," he decided. "See if there's any movement, anything suspicious." Hours dragged on as they kept watch on the house. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the quiet street. That was when they noticed a young man exiting through the front door. Ryan gasped, leaning forward in his seat. "My God! Mark, do you see that? He looks like..." Mark felt a lump in his throat. The boy, about 18 years old, was the spitting image of Ryan in his youth. There was no doubt. It was Lucas. "It's him," Mark whispered, barely believing his own eyes. Ryan made to get out of the car, but Mark grabbed his arm. "Wait, we can't just approach him like that. We need to be careful." "Careful," Ryan hissed, his eyes never leaving the figure of Lucas, who was now walking down the sidewalk. "He's my son, Mark. My son I thought was dead for 10 years. "I know," Mark replied, trying to keep calm. "But think, Lucas has been kept hidden for a decade. He probably doesn't know the truth about who he is. If we approach him abruptly, we might scare him or, worse, alert whoever's protecting him." Ryan hesitated, the conflict clear on his face. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Okay, so what's the plan?" They decided to discreetly follow Lucas, waiting for an opportunity to approach him alone. The young man walked a few blocks before entering a small cafe. "I'll go in," Mark said. "You stay here. If I go in with you, there's more chance he'll recognize you." Inside the cafe, Mark positioned himself strategically, ordering a coffee while watching Lucas out of the corner of his eye. The young man seemed absorbed in a book, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. That's when Mark noticed something alarming. Two men in suits, seemingly out of place in the cafe's casual atmosphere, entered and began scanning the room with watchful eyes. Mark's heart raced. Had they been discovered? Acting on instinct, Mark quickly approached Lucas's table. "Excuse me," he said in a low, urgent voice. "I don't have time to explain, but you're in danger. You need to come with me now." Lucas looked at him, confused and scared. "Who are you? What are you talking about?" "Your name is Lucas Thompson," Mark said quickly, seeing the men in suits approaching. "Your father is Ryan Thompson. Everything you believe about your life is a lie." Please trust me. We need to get out of here now." Lucas's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. For a moment, Mark feared he would scream or run. But then, something in the young man's gaze changed. Recognition? Acceptance? "Okay," Lucas said simply, standing up. Mark quickly guided Lucas to the back of the cafe, exiting through a service door just in time to see the men in suits rushing toward them. "Ryan!" Mark shouted as they reached the street. "Let's go!" The car screeched to a halt beside them, Ryan at the wheel with wide eyes fixed on Lucas. "Get in!" he yelled. As the car sped through the streets of Los Angeles, Mark looked back at the rear seat where Lucas sat, looking both scared and determined. "I knew," the young man murmured. "I always knew something was wrong, that I didn't belong in that life." Ryan, tears in his eyes, tried to keep focus on the road while casting constant glances at his son in the rearview mirror. Mark knew they weren't safe yet. The chase was only beginning, and the secrets they had unearthed were more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But looking at father and son reunited after a decade, he felt a wave of determination. No matter what lay ahead, he would do everything to protect Lucas and help Ryan reclaim the lost years. As the car tore through the night in Los Angeles, Mark knew the real battle was only beginning. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, driven by a purpose greater than himself. The road ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but they would face whatever came their way together. The car engine roared as Ryan drove through the winding roads leading out of Los Angeles. In the back seat, Lucas looked out the window, his eyes reflecting the lights of the city fading behind them. Mark, in the passenger seat, alternated his gaze between the rearview mirror, checking to see if they were being followed, and the young man they had just rescued. After hours of tense, silent driving, Ryan finally pulled the car into an isolated motel in the mountains. "We should be safe here for now," he said, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. Inside the motel's simple room, father and son finally faced each other. The silence was palpable, laden with years of separation and secrets. "Lucas," Ryan began, his voice trembling. I don't even know where to start. All these years, I thought, they told us that I was dead," Lucas completed, his voice surprisingly calm. "I know, or rather, I always suspected something wasn't right. The adoptive parents who raised me, they were good to me, but I always felt there was something more." Mark watched the scene, feeling both an intruder and a vital part of this moment. "Lucas," he intervened gently, "how long have you suspected your life wasn't what it seemed?" The young man sighed, running his hand through his hair in a way that reminded Mark of Ryan. "Always, I guess. Little things didn't add up. The way my parents seemed nervous sometimes when I asked about my past. The strange visits from men in suits. And then, the dreams." "Dreams?" Ryan asked, leaning forward. Lucas nodded. "Recurring dreams. Of a hospital and operating room. And a face. Your face," he said, looking at Ryan. "I always woke up with the feeling that I was forgetting something important." Mark felt a shiver run down his spine. "Lucas, what exactly do you remember from that day at the hospital?" "From the day of the surgery." The young man frowned, concentrating. "It's all very blurry. I remember being scared, very scared, and then voices, people arguing. Someone saying it was too dangerous, that I had seen something I shouldn't have." Ryan and Mark exchanged alarmed looks. "What did you see, Lucas?" Ryan asked gently. Lucas closed his eyes, as if trying to access a distant memory. I'm not sure. It was something about an important man. Someone famous, I think. He was doing something wrong, something illegal. I saw him by accident, and then everything became a blur." Mark felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. "They must have decided it was safer to make the world believe you had died in surgery than risk you revealing what you saw." Ryan, tears in his eyes, moved closer to Lucas. "Son, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for not searching for you, for believing the lie. If I had known." Lucas, hesitant at first, allowed his father to embrace him. "It wasn't your fault," he murmured. They deceived us all. As father and son shared this moment of reunion, Mark discreetly stepped back, giving them privacy. He stepped out onto the motel balcony, looking at the distant city lights. His mind raced, processing all the new information. What exactly had Lucas seen? Who was the powerful man involved? And more importantly, now that they had rescued Lucas, what would be the next step? Mark knew they couldn't simply return to their normal lives. The people behind this conspiracy wouldn't give up easily. They needed a plan. Returning to the room, Mark found Ryan and Lucas sitting side by side on the bed, years of untold stories flowing between them. "Sorry to interrupt," Mark said softly, "but we need to decide our next move. We can't stay here forever, and I'm sure they're already looking for us." Ryan nodded, his expression turning serious. "You're right. Lucas, do you think you can remember more details about what you saw that day? Anything could be useful." Lucas frowned, concentrating. There's something. A name, I think. Or part of a name. Shadow. Project Shadow, maybe?" Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard that name before, whispered in the hospital corridors, always with a tone of fear and reverence. "That could be the key to unraveling everything," Mark said. "But it also puts us in even more danger. Whoever's behind Project Shadow, they have enough power to make a Hollywood star's son disappear for a decade." Ryan placed a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder. "No matter the danger, I won't lose my son again." Lucas looked at his father and then at Mark, determination rising in his eyes. "I want the truth. I want to know why my life was stolen from me." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also a spark of hope. "Then that's it. We'll find out what Project Shadow is and expose this whole conspiracy." As the three began to plan their next steps, Mark couldn't help but think of how their lives had intertwined in ways he could never have predicted. From disgraced surgeon to hairdresser, and now the key to unraveling a conspiracy that would shake Hollywood's power structures. The road ahead would be dangerous, but looking at Ryan and Lucas, finally reunited, Mark knew it was worth fighting for. The truth, no matter how painful, needed to come to light. And so, in the early hours of the morning, while the rest of the world slept, three unlikely allies prepared to face a battle that would change their lives forever. The sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple as a palpable tension hung in the air. Mark, Ryan, and Lucas found themselves hidden in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the heart of the operation they had mounted in the past few weeks to uncover the secrets of Project Shadow. "Are you sure about this?" Ryan asked, his voice tense as he adjusted the hidden microphone in his lapel. "If something goes wrong," Mark nodded gravely, "it's our best chance. Maybe the only one." The informant guaranteed that everyone involved would be at this meeting tonight. Lucas, who over the past few weeks had transformed from a frightened teenager into a determined young man, checked the recording equipment. "We're ready. Let's expose those bastards." The weeks following Lucas's rescue had been an emotional roller coaster of emotions and discoveries. Each new clue led them deeper into the web of lies and corruption that permeated the upper echelons of Hollywood and politics. Project Shadow, they discovered, was much more than just the cover-up of Lucas's abduction. It was a massive blackmail and manipulation operation, using secrets and scandals to control some of the country's most powerful people. Ryan adjusted his disguise one last time before heading to the door. "Remember, no matter what happens, the priority is to keep Lucas safe." Mark and Lucas nodded, the gravity of the situation weighing on them. Tonight, they would risk everything to expose the truth. As Ryan infiltrated the secret meeting, Mark and Lucas monitored everything from their van hidden nearby. The minutes dragged on, tense and loaded with apprehension. Suddenly, Ryan's voice crackled through the headphones. "They're here. All of them." Mark and Lucas exchanged nervous glances as they listened to the meeting unfold. The names of prominent politicians, movie stars, and media moguls were casually mentioned, each implicated in some scandal or crime that Project Shadow had covered up. "And what about the Thompson kid?" a deep voice asked, making Lucas flinch. "Are you sure he's not a threat?" Relax. Another voice replied with disdain. The kid doesn't remember anything. And even if he did, who would believe him? That was when the plan started to fall apart. One of the guards, more attentive than the others, noticed something odd in Ryan's behavior. "Hey, you there!" the guard shouted. "Stop right there." Chaos erupted. Shouts and sounds of struggle filled Mark and Lucas's headphones. "Dad!" Lucas shouted, making a move to leave the van. Mark held him back. "No, it's too dangerous." But before they could decide what to do, the van's door was ripped open. Armed men dragged them out, taking them inside the building where the meeting was taking place. Inside the building, a surreal scene unfolded. Ryan, with a bloodied face, was on his knees, surrounded by armed men. Around him, figures Lucas recognized from magazine covers and news reports watched the scene with a mix of anger and fear. Well, a smooth and dangerous voice cut through the silence. A middle-aged, elegant man stepped forward. The whole family reunited. How touching. Mark recognized the man immediately. It was Charles Blackwood, one of Hollywood's most powerful producers and, apparently, the mastermind behind Project Shadow. "You won't get away with this, Blackwood." Ryan spat, struggling against his captors. Blackwood laughed, a cold and humorless sound. "Don't be naive, Ryan. We've already gotten away with it. For years. What makes you think tonight will be any different?" That was when Lucas stepped forward, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "Because now I remember everything." A stunned silence fell over the room. Blackwood, for the first time, seemed to lose his composure. "What are you talking about, kid?" he growled. "That night, 10 years ago," Lucas continued, his voice gaining strength. "I saw you, Blackwood. I saw you and Senator Matthews planning the assassination of that journalist. Karen Simmons, right? The one who was about to expose your whole corruption scheme." Blackwood's face paled. Others in the room began to murmur, casting nervous glances at each other. Mark, sensing the change in atmosphere, decided to risk everything. "It's over, Blackwood. We have everything recorded. Every name, every crime. Right now, copies of the recordings are being sent to every major news network in the country." It was a bluff, of course, but in the confusion and panic of the moment, it worked. Chaos erupted. Some tried to flee, others began shouting accusations. In the midst of the confusion, Mark, Ryan, and Lucas managed to break free, running for the exit. Gunshots echoed behind them as they ran through the dark streets of Los Angeles. Sirens began to blare in the distance, drawing closer. Finally, exhausted and breathless, they reached a safe location, a small apartment that Mark had rented under a false name as a precaution. As they caught their breath, the magnitude of what they had just done began to sink in. "Is it over?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling. Ryan pulled his son into a tight embrace. "Yes, son. I think it's finally over." Mark watched the scene with a mix of relief and apprehension. They had exposed the truth, but at what cost? And what did the future hold for them now? As the first light of morning began to filter through the windows, Mark knew their lives would never be the same. But looking at Ryan and Lucas, finally reunited and free from the secrets that had separated them for so long, he knew it had all been worth it. The final confrontation was over, but their story was far from finished. A new chapter was just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the windows of cuts and conversations, illuminating the salon's interior with a golden glow. Mark Stevens, or rather, Dr. Marcus Stevenson, was wiping down the gleaming counter, a gesture so familiar it almost masked the profound transformation he had undergone. 6 months had passed since the fateful night when the truth about Project Shadow came to light. 6 months of turmoil, revelations, and finally, the beginning of healing. The doorbell tinkled, announcing the arrival of a client. Mark looked up, a genuine smile spreading across his face as he saw Ryan and Lucas Thompson entering the salon. "Good morning, Doctor," Ryan joked, using the title Mark had recently reclaimed. "Good morning to you too," Mark replied, gesturing to the chairs. "The usual?" Lucas, now with a healthy glow in eyes that were once always wary, nodded. "Please, although I still find it strange to have a neurosurgeon cutting my hair." The three laughed, the ease of their interaction a testament to the bond forged through the adversities they had faced together. As Mark worked on Lucas's hair, Ryan idly flipped through a magazine. "Did you see the news today? 3 more convictions in the shadow case." Mark nodded gravely. "I did. It seems the web of corruption was even larger than we imagined." The months following the exposure of Project Shadow were a whirlwind of investigations, trials, and shocking revelations. The scandal shook the power structures of Hollywood and beyond, leading to the downfall of politicians, media moguls, and stars who once seemed untouchable. For Mark, Ryan, and Lucas, the aftermath brought challenges and opportunities. Initially, they were at the center of a media storm, their lives scrutinized and exposed. But as the dust settled, a new reality began to take shape. Mark, after a rigorous reevaluation process, had his medical license reinstated. He now divided his time between the clinic and the salon, finding a unique balance between his two passions. "You know," Mark commented as he trimmed Lucas's hair, "sometimes I still wonder if I did the right thing by keeping the salon." Ryan, looking over the magazine, smiled. "You've saved lives in both professions, Mark. Here," he gestured to the cozy salon, "you saved your own." Lucas nodded in agreement. "Besides, where else could I get a haircut and a neurological consultation at the same time?" The three laughed again, the sound of their joy filling the small salon. As the morning progressed, other clients began to arrive. Some were familiar faces, loyal customers who stood by Mark even after the revelation of his true identity. Others were new, drawn by the extraordinary story behind the neurosurgeon hairdresser, as the media had dubbed him. Amid the haircuts and casual conversations, Mark reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him here. From a surgeon at the peak of his career to a broken man hiding as a hairdresser, and now he was something entirely new, a fusion of his experiences, his mistakes, and his redemptions. As he worked, Mark occasionally glanced at Ryan and Lucas, seeing father and son together, rebuilding the relationship that had been stolen from them, was a constant source of inspiration and a reminder of why it was worth fighting for the truth. At the end of the day, when the last client had left and Mark was closing the salon, Ryan and Lucas stayed behind, helping tidy up. "So," Ryan began, a tone of expectation in his voice, "tomorrow's the big day, isn't it?" Mark nodded, a mix of nervousness and excitement in his eyes. "Yes, my first surgery in almost a decade. I'm terrified, to be honest." Lucas stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Mark's shoulder. "You'll do great. If you could dismantle a conspiracy while cutting hair, a little brain surgery should be a piece of cake, right?" The three laughed, the tension easing a bit. "Thank you," Mark said softly, looking at father and son, "for everything. Without you, I don't know where I'd be now." Ryan smiled, extending a hand for a firm shake. "We're the ones who should be thanking you, Mark. You gave us our family back." As they said their goodbyes, promising to meet for a celebratory dinner after the next day's surgery, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the winding paths life sometimes takes. Locking the door of cuts and conversations, Mark looked at the sign now hanging below the salon's name. Dr. Marcus Stevenson, neurological consultations available by appointment. With a smile, he turned to the bustling street of Los Angeles. The future, for the first time in a long time, looked bright and full of possibilities. Mark knew that no matter what lay ahead, he would face it with the strength and wisdom gained through his extraordinary experiences. And so, the man who once refused a $1 million tip because he carried the weight of an unbearable secret now walked with his head held high, free from the ghosts of the past and eager for what tomorrow might bring. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button below and join our community. Based on your interests, we've picked this story for you that's showing on your screen right now. Click to watch it now. We're sure you'll love it. See you next time.